Welcome to the comfy zone. Make yourself at home.
I think something is wrong with the barista at my local coffee shop. I've been going in there a lot lately, because it's just around the corner from where we live and they have really good coffee. And while she always gives me decent service, for some reason, her eyes seem to be following me everywhere. It's a little creepy. When I go in the morning before work, I can see that she's watching me as soon as I walk through the door. And when I sit down at one of the tables by the window, she'll keep glancing over at me, but then quickly look away whenever I catch her eye. Later on in the day, when I come back home from work, she'll still be here behind the counter making coffees for people, and again, she'll keep looking at me, but this time without any pretense about trying not to stare. She won't even try to pretend like she's paying attention to what someone else is saying, rather than fixating on whatever it is they're doing. No, she's definitely staring at me. My wife Lisa also says she sees her looking out the front windows all the time. She watches our car drive up, and she'll stand there waiting for us until we get inside before she goes back to work. But if you ask me, she seems more interested in what I'm doing than who I am. While I'm in there getting my coffee, which I love, by the way, she stares right at me, studying my face, watching every move I make. At least once a week, I'll leave the place shaking my head and thinking about what it must be like for other customers. What do they think she's seeing? That I'm some kind of freak or something? Maybe she knows me from somewhere, but I don't know how. The last time I was in the coffee shop, she did something particularly strange. She kept staring at me, but instead of being a little nervous and fidgeting with her hands or tugging at her hair or doing anything she normally does when I'm there, she started putting stuff into my bag. First, she'd put a spoon in, and then she'd take it out, but after that she'd shove another item in and then pull it out again. This went on for about a minute, so I finally asked her what she was doing. She looked surprised, but she didn't stop. Instead, she stood there smiling at me, waiting for me to notice what she was doing. So I took the bag from her hands, opened it up, and dumped everything out onto the table. The random coffee shop junk and plastic cutlery was weird enough, but even more strange was a neatly folded photo of herself that sat on top of the pile. In the picture, she was looking straight at the camera, holding her arms out wide. Her smile was big and bright, and she had a sparkle in her eyes like she was proud of something. There were two guys standing next to her, both dressed in black jackets and jeans. They seemed to be having an argument with her, but she wasn't trying to defend herself. She just smiled like she was happy to be wherever she was. "What is this?" I said, picking up the photograph. She told me it belonged to me, then she walked off, leaving me alone with my coffee and the other customers watching me curiously. The whole thing was bizarre. I mean, who would give their own photo away to someone they barely know? Still, it didn't feel like a coincidence. It felt like she was giving it to me because she wanted to, which made me wonder why she was so obsessed with me. The whole situation made me feel nervous and queasy, so I packed up all of my things I had dumped out of the bag and went home. I called my wife on the way home and told her what had happened. "It's probably just something stupid," she said, but I knew it wasn't. When I got home, I turned on the TV and tried to forget about it. After about half an hour, though, I couldn't help myself. I had to know what was going on. Even if it was nothing, I needed to find out. So I grabbed my laptop and started searching for clues. I know the names of some of the more extroverted baristas at the coffee shop, so I looked them up on Facebook. After scrolling through multiple friends lists to see if I could find the girl who put the photo in my bag, I finally found her. Her name is Emily Prentice, and she lives on the east side of town, not far from where I live, actually. With a little digging, I also discovered that she has 3 brothers, 2 older ones and another younger one who looks exactly like her. All of them have dark hair and blue eyes and are around the same height as Emily. I recognized 2 of the boys as being the ones in the photo. Her post history was what caught me off guard. A few months ago, she made a post about one of her brothers named Nathan, who was in a serious car accident, rushed to the hospital, but sadly passed away. Some of her posts memorialized him as she recounted the fun things they used to do together, like going camping and skiing, I've known people with siblings who have died before, but I still can't imagine how painful it must be to lose any family member. Nearly every day for a month, she would post about how she wished he would come back. Then, one day, the posts took an ominous turn. She started regularly posting about how she was going to get Nathan back. Some of her friends commented and expressed concerns about how she was coping, but she just ignored them. Eventually, she started posting about how she saw Nathan and how good it was to see him again. That was followed by regular updates of how she would see Nathan at work, but that she was too busy to talk much when she was working. As the days progressed, the posts became less frequent until eventually they stopped altogether. I finished my search and closed the laptop feeling conflicted. On one hand, I thought this was a weird coincidence that made absolutely no sense. We're not close. She's just a stranger who works at a coffee shop. But on the other hand, I couldn't shake the feelings of unease I'd been experiencing since she first appeared. I honestly couldn't think of a time I had ever seen her anywhere else besides the coffee shop. My mind kept racing, so I decided to go for a walk instead of sitting at home and thinking. I kissed Lisa on the cheek, put on my shoes, grabbed my keys, and left. It was getting dark, and the street lamps were buzzing to life. I felt sad for Emily because the way she was coping didn't seem healthy. At the same time, I felt nervous and uneasy about the bizarre interaction we had when she gave me the photo. I continued walking under the street lamps and began to sense that I might not be alone, but figured I was just paranoid. Cicada songs gradually quieted, at which point I heard the sound of footsteps behind me. I turned around and sure enough, Emily was right behind me, trying to catch up to me. She had that same smile I remembered from the photo, and I could hear her laughing between her deep breaths as she started running toward me. The thought of this stalker chasing me in the dark pushed my body into fight or flight mode, so I began running. I ran in the first direction I thought would get me home the quickest, and the sudden turn caught Emily off guard. She threw her arms up in the air in frustration, but smiled and laughed, picking up her pace as she began chasing after me. I sped up and ran as fast as I could, terrified at the sound of her laughing in the dark. I looked behind me, and she had stopped to catch her breath, bent over with her hands on her knees, huffing and puffing. As I continued running, I looked back and saw she had her hand in the air, as she shouted that she was glad to see me again. At this point, I felt tired, but safe enough to slow to a jog. What was wrong with this girl? I couldn't stick around and find out. I rounded the last street corner to get to my house, made a final dash to the door, unlocked it, opened it, and slammed it shut after I got inside. I locked the door and checked the peephole, but I couldn't see Emily. I stopped to catch my breath, but my head was practically spinning from the adrenaline rush. I went into the kitchen and grabbed a hand towel to wipe away the sweat that was pouring down my face. My heart was still racing, and I was still breathing heavily. I heard Lisa walking downstairs, and I tried to calm myself down so that I wouldn't worry her. Apparently, I hadn't tried hard enough because I could see the concern on her face before she even said anything to me. "Oh, I just got back from a walk. You know, the weirdest thing just happened," I said before Lisa interrupted me. "Look at you," she said. "You're drenched in sweat. You look like you just took a swim in your clothes." She took my hands into hers, noticing they were still shaking. She pulled me close, realizing something was wrong, and looked up at me. Her eyes were wide but sincerely concerned as she looked into mine and asked, "Did something happen while you were on your walk, Nathan?"